The Hartwell family had perfected the art of treating me like a perpetual adolescent. At 26, I was still the family afterthought while my golden sister Jessica planned her wedding to Marcus Pemberton, heir to a construction fortune. Claire just isn't ready for this level of social complexity, Mom explained during Sunday dinner, using that patient tone reserved for discussing difficult children. Jessica's wedding will have very important people. Business leaders, political figures, Marcus's family connections. It requires sophistication. I continued eating while the table buzzed with excitement about seating arrangements and guest lists. Jessica held court, describing dress fittings and honeymoon plans while her engagement ring caught the chandelier light. The Pemberton family moves in elite circles, Dad added proudly. Marcus's father sits on corporate boards. His mother chairs the hospital foundation. These aren't people you can wing it with socially. The implication hung heavy. I couldn't be trusted in elevated company. Claire's always been more casual, Jessica said with her practiced fond smile. She's comfortable with her college friends, her little activist groups. But this wedding brings together serious families with significant business connections. Little activist groups. The language carefully minimized my work while maintaining plausible deniability about their true motives. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked quietly. Mom exchanged glances with Dad. We think it might be better if you skip the ceremony. Maybe join for a smaller family celebration later. The room fell silent except for silverware clinking against china. You want me to skip my own sister's wedding? It's not that we don't want you there, Jessica said quickly. This event has so many moving parts, important relationships to navigate. One wrong comment could affect Marcus's family connections, his father's business relationships. Uncle Robert nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. Wedding days are stressful enough without worrying about complications. Complications. That's what I'd become. Not a sister but a potential embarrassment requiring management. Claire can help with setup, Mom offered. Behind-the-scenes work. That way she's involved but not visible during the important parts. Behind-the-scenes work. I was being offered the role of wedding staff, not family member. The important thing is Jessica's perfect day, Dad said. This represents our family's entry into a new level of society. We can't afford any missteps. I was the misstep they were preventing. Jessica had always been everything our parents dreamed of, beautiful, charming, socially adept. At 28 she'd parlayed her psychology degree into a position at Marcus's father's company managing community relations, which seemed to involve attending galas and organizing corporate events. Jessica has such natural leadership, Mom would gush. The way she's handled wedding planning, coordinating with Marcus's family, managing social complexities. Real maturity. The contrast was never explicit but always implied. While Jessica focused on social advancement and strategic relationships, I'd wasted time on unrealistic pursuits like law school and public interest work. Claire's always been idealistic, Mom explained to relatives. She went to law school thinking she could change the world. Very sweet but not practical. She works for some little nonprofit now. The little nonprofit was the Civil Rights Defense Fund, where I'd spent 3 years building cases that changed federal legislation. But in their narrative, my work was extended adolescence I'd eventually outgrow. Unless you're with a big corporate firm, it's just charity work, Aunt Margaret had said. Not sustainable. Claire will figure it out eventually, Dad replied with patient authority. She just needs to mature, understand how the real world works. The real world, according to my family, was Jessica's world of strategic marriages and social climbing. My commitment to civil rights law was naive idealism. The wedding planning exclusion. As Jessica's wedding approached, my exclusion became systematic. Family meetings about venues, catering and guest lists happened without me. When I asked about helping, I was assigned peripheral tasks. Claire can handle wedding favors, Mom announced during one planning session. Something simple. While Jessica selected flowers with Marcus's mother and Dad negotiated catering contracts, I assembled small gifts for tables. What about the rehearsal dinner guest list? I asked. Already handled, Jessica said quickly. Marcus's family has specific ideas about who should be included. Business associates, family friends, people important to both families' social circles. The message was clear. I wasn't important to anyone's social circles. The final blow came when I discovered out-of-state cousins had been invited to the rehearsal dinner while I was excluded entirely. It's more of a business function, Mom explained. Marcus's father is using it to strengthen corporate relationships. It requires professional polish. But cousin Tommy is invited? I asked about our cousin who dropped out of college. Tommy's dating someone from Marcus's father's company, Jessica said defensively. It's a business connection. So Tommy's girlfriend's employment made him more socially acceptable than my law degree. The guest list is finalized, Dad said with finality. Everything's submitted to caterers, venue, Marcus's family. Too late for changes. But I knew the real reason. My family was ashamed of me, not because of actual missteps, but because my career didn't align with their values about success. What they didn't know was that my work had connected me to some of the most powerful figures in the legal establishment. 6 months earlier, Judge Patricia Whitmore, the first African-American woman on our federal district court, had begun mentoring me personally. You have exceptional legal instincts, she told me. The kind that shapes precedent. When Jessica announced Judge Whitmore would officiate her wedding, I'd been stunned. How did you get Judge Whitmore? I'd asked. Marcus's father knows her through business connections, Jessica had said vaguely. But I knew Judge Whitmore was extremely selective about ceremonies she agreed to perform. 2 weeks before the wedding, I'd received an unexpected call from her chambers. Claire, I understand you're related to the bride in the Pemberton Hartwell wedding. Jessica is my sister. Interesting. When Marcus's father requested my services, he specifically mentioned the family's commitment to social justice. He highlighted that the bride's sister works in civil rights law. My stomach dropped. They'd secured Judge Whitmore's services because of my work, not despite it. I told him I'd be honored to officiate, particularly given my professional relationship with you. I assume you'll be at the head table. There's been some confusion about seating, I said carefully. Confusion. Her voice carried courtroom sharpness. Claire, I accepted specifically because Marcus's father assured me this represented a union between families committed to public service. Your work was central to that representation. I understand. I'll see you at the ceremony. Several federal prosecutors will be attending, along with appellate court colleagues. Excellent networking for someone with your trajectory. After the call, I sat processing the implications. The Pemberton family had secured Judge Whitmore by highlighting my credentials while my own family excluded me for those same achievements. The final exclusion. 1 week before the wedding, family dynamics reached crescendo during our last pre-wedding dinner. Jessica described final preparations while sitting like a queen at the table's head. Judge Whitmore's office confirmed everything, she announced proudly. Can you believe we got a federal judge? Marcus's father says it shows the caliber of families involved. Very impressive, Uncle Robert agreed. A federal judge sends a message about social standing. It's about connections you build, Dad said, looking meaningfully at me. Relationships cultivated throughout life. Jessica and Marcus positioned themselves to access this influence. The irony felt surreal. Celebrating the social coup while excluding the family member whose relationship made it possible. Speaking of the ceremony, Mom shifted to my dreaded topic. We've finalized last-minute details. Claire, we've arranged for you to help with guest services during reception. Very involved, just behind the scenes. What about the ceremony itself? Really just immediate family and closest friends, Jessica said smoothly. Very intimate focused. The reception is where everyone celebrates. So I'm not immediate family? Silence. Even cousins stopped talking. Of course you're family, Mom said quickly. But the ceremony is very formal, structured. No room for unexpected elements. Unexpected elements. I'd become their uncontrollable variable. Judge Whitmore specifically asked about my attendance, I said calmly. The family exchanged glances, unprepared for this development. You know Judge Whitmore? Jessica asked uncertainly. She's my mentor. We work together on federal civil rights cases. 30 seconds of silence as they processed this information. That's wonderful, Mom said with false brightness. What a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. The Pemberton family requested her services specifically because of my work. They told her the wedding represented families committed to social justice. Dad paled. What exactly did they tell her? that I was central to the family's commitment to public service. Judge Whitmore accepted because of her professional relationship with me. Jessica looked sick. Did you arrange for her to officiate? No. But Marcus's father used my credentials to secure her services. She's expecting me at the head table. The dinner dissolved into whispered conferences and panicked planning. Their social coup was built on the professional reputation they'd been hiding. The revelation. Wedding day arrived with all Jessica's planned pageantry. 300 guests representing the state's most influential families gathered at the Pemberton Country Club. I arrived in my federal court dress, polished and professional in ways my family rarely witnessed. Jessica was making final preparations when I entered the family area. Claire, I'm so glad you're here. Judge Whitmore specifically asked about you during yesterday's rehearsal. What did you tell her? That you'd be front row with immediate family. I changed the seating chart last minute. My exclusion had been quietly reversed without anyone informing me. The ceremony was elegant, Judge Whitmore commanding attention in judicial robes. During vow exchanges she made several references to family's commitment to community service, her eyes finding mine each time. Marriage is not just union of individuals, but joining of families who share common values and commitments to something greater, she intoned. After the ceremony, the reception line formed with military precision. Judge Whitmore approached with several distinguished guests I recognized from federal proceedings. Jessica, congratulations on a beautiful ceremony. Thank you so much for officiating. It means everything having someone of your stature. Judge Whitmore turned to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, you must be very proud of both daughters. Jessica's happiness and Claire's exceptional civil rights work. Oh yes, Mom said artificially. So proud of both girls. Claire's voting rights work has been particularly impressive. Her brief in the Richardson case was cited in 3 federal decisions. Exceptional legal writing. Dad nodded enthusiastically, though confusion filled his eyes. He had no idea what Richardson involved or why federal citations mattered. And her presentation to the Supreme Court clerk last month was outstanding. We're recommending her for the Federal Appellate Clerkship Program. Supreme Court Clerk. Federal Appellate Clerkship. Foreign concepts to my family. That's wonderful, Jessica managed, voice strained. Judge Whitmore turned to me warmly. Claire, I'd like you to meet colleagues very interested in your work. She guided me toward waiting distinguished guests. Federal Prosecutor Margaret Chin, Appellate Judge Robert Morrison, and Supreme Court Justice Hoffman's Chief Clerk, Sarah Williams. Each introduction referenced specific legal work, cases I'd argued, briefs I'd written. These weren't pleasantries but professional recognition from federal judiciary's highest levels. Your Commerce Clause analysis was brilliant, Prosecutor Chin said. We've hoped to discuss collaboration on upcoming cases. Justice Department has been following your work, Judge Morrison added. We have positions opening that might interest someone with your background. The justice specifically asked me to extend invitation to apply for next term's clerk positions, the chief clerk said conspiratorially. Your writing sample was exceptional. As conversations continued, my family stood nearby, faces cycling through confusion, shock, and dawning comprehension. The daughter they'd considered embarrassing was being courted by American legal system's most powerful figures. Claire, Judge Whitmore said during a lull, would you mind if I made a brief announcement? This crowd would appreciate hearing about your achievements. Before I could respond, she'd moved toward the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. 300 guests turned toward the judge. As many know, I officiated today partly because both families demonstrated commitment to public service and social justice aligning with judicial values. She gestured toward me. I want to particularly recognize Claire Hartwell, the bride's sister whose civil rights work has been extraordinary. Complete spotlight shift. Every guest focused on me, the supposedly invisible family member. In 3 years, Claire has argued 12 federal court cases with 11 successful outcomes. Her work has influenced federal legislation, established important precedents, and protected voting rights for millions. Appreciative murmurs rippled through the crowd. People who understood federal court victory's significance. Most recently, Claire has been selected for the Supreme Court Clerkship Program, one of American law's most prestigious positions. She'll work directly with justices on cases shaping constitutional interpretation. Immediate, sustained applause. Federal prosecutors, corporate attorneys, business leaders, and political figures rose in recognition of achievements my family had never valued. I looked toward my family's table. Mom and Dad sat frozen, their assumptions completely collapsed. Jessica managed a weak smile, but her eyes showed shock at discovering her immature sister was being celebrated by people she desperately hoped to impress. Judge Whitmore concluded by announcing that several guests were eager to discuss collaboration, and networking conversations would continue throughout the evening. As she returned the microphone, distinguished guests surrounded me again, joined by corporate attorneys and business leaders wanting to understand my work and explore connections. For 2 hours, I was the reception center while my family watched their fundamental assumptions about success and social value crumble in real time. The aftermath. 24 hours later, everything had changed. Local papers picked up Judge Whitmore's announcement, with one business journal profiling rising legal stars making waves in federal courts. Post-wedding brunch was cognitive dissonance in action. The same people who'd excluded me from planning now wanted detailed explanations of Supreme Court clerkships. Why didn't you tell us about these achievements? Mom asked privately, mixing hurt with confusion. I tried. Every time I mentioned court victories or federal cases, someone changed the subject or dismissed it as impractical idealism. But we didn't understand, Dad protested. You never explained how important these things were. You never asked. When I said I argued before federal courts, you called it charity work. When I mentioned working with judges, you said I needed to get serious. This marked the beginning of fundamental reckoning with their assumptions. Over following weeks, as Supreme Court clerkship news spread through their circles, dismissive narratives became impossible to maintain. Jessica handled revelation with surprising grace. I'm proud of you. I just wish I'd understood what you were accomplishing. Would you have believed it? Every time I shared my work, you minimized it as naive idealism. You're right. We weren't listening. Most significantly, Marcus's family called to apologize and invite me to family gatherings and business events. Your legal expertise could be valuable for our business. And frankly, your professional connections are impressive. We'd be honored to include you. Complete irony. The family celebrating elevation through Jessica's marriage discovered I provided access to far more influential circles. But the most important transformation was internal. I'd learned my worth wasn't determined by family recognition, and success didn't require their validation. 6 months later, I accepted the Supreme Court clerkship and prepared for Washington. Family response revealed how completely their understanding had shifted. This is incredible, Mom said during farewell dinner, voice filled with previously absent pride. Working directly with Supreme Court justices. We're so proud. Dad attempted career advice about Washington networking, but suggestions lacked former authority. Make sure you connect with other clerks. Those relationships could be valuable. I will, I replied neutrally. His opinion was just one voice among many, no longer carrying power to make me question professional judgment. Jessica approached me privately. I owe you an apology. For wedding planning, exclusion, not standing up when Mom and Dad dismissed your career. Thank you. I was jealous. Your achievements are so much more substantial than anything I've accomplished. I use social connections to marry well, but you've actually changed the world. We chose different paths. There's room for both. The family's newfound respect came with unexpected challenges. They now wanted to claim credit for my success. We always knew Claire was special, became the new narrative. We encouraged law school, supported her civil rights interest. But I maintained boundaries around revisionist histories. When Uncle Robert suggested my clerkship would be good for the whole family's reputation, I corrected him. My career represents my choices and work. It's not a family achievement. 2 years into my clerkship, I was helping draft opinions that would influence American law for generations. The impractical idealism they'd criticized was now shaping constitutional interpretation at government's highest level. Family dynamics had evolved into something resembling mutual respect, though transformation wasn't without complications. Parents learned to ask about my work rather than offering uninformed advice, but sometimes overcorrected into treating me like untouchable legal authority. Claire would know about this, became Dad's reflexive response to any legal question. even when my expertise wasn't relevant. Jessica and I developed genuine friendship built on honest acknowledgement of our different strengths. She'd embraced community leadership and charity organization, finding fulfillment complementing Marcus's business activities. But most importantly, I'd achieved complete liberation from their opinions about my worth. Family members who'd once shaped my self-perception now carried no more influence over professional confidence than strangers' comments. During a recent visit, Mom offered advice about post-clerkship plans. You should consider prestigious law firms. Something providing security and status. I'm returning to civil rights work. Same mission, expanded scope. But you could make so much more in corporate law, Dad added. Build real wealth, establish yourself in elite legal circles. I'm already established in elite legal circles. My definition of elite focuses on impact rather than income. The conversation ended without argument or defensiveness. Their opinions were just data points now, not directives requiring compliance. Looking around the table at people who'd shaped my childhood and challenged my adulthood, I felt something I'd never experienced in this dining room. Complete peace with exactly who I was and what I'd chosen. The little girl desperately wanting family approval had evolved into a woman knowing her own value. Professional recognition at Jessica's wedding had been validating, but it wasn't my self-worth as source. I'd learned the most important lesson. The opinion that matters most is your own informed assessment of your contributions to the world. The family that once considered me embarrassing now celebrated my achievements. But that transformation mattered far less than my journey towards self-acceptance and professional confidence. That realization was worth more than any Supreme Court clerkship, more valuable than any professional recognition, more powerful than any external validation. I'd become exactly who I was meant to be, with or without their understanding.